Well, next I'd like to introduce our featured model, Will Anon. Will and I met a little while ago, and I was really impressed with his modeling and conversations that we had. And I decided that he needed to come and talk to you all and show you his great layout. So, Will, thank you so much for being here this evening with your wife. And I'll turn it over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Jim. Thank you for inviting me. You asked me to tell you a little about myself and to show off my current layout, which is behind me here. So what I've got planned for tonight is a 24-photo history of my modeling experience, followed by a short brand new video. It's about 10 minutes long of my current layout. It was made especially for this show tonight. And then we'll open it up to questions, of course. Now, I'm always asked how I got into model railroading. For myself, ever since I was a kid, ever since I can remember, I like trains. I like the train songs. Like in the 60s was Johnny Cash, of course. And then Gordon Lightfoot came along with the Canadian Railroad trilogy about the Canadian Pacific Railway. And in one song, Johnny sings that I got a thing about trains. And that sort of sums me up. But the trains I have a thing about are steam trains, and particularly the ones that ran through the area that I used to live in. For model railroading, I must say it was my father's fault. He was a model railroader, and through the 60s and 70s, we did layouts. In this picture, I'm in the cowboy hat, and my father's got the back to us. He hand laid all this track, and in the 60s, the ties came on a big spool of fiber rails. And I can remember when it came to turnouts, he went and purchased a turnout, one. He said it was way too expensive. So he took it apart, put it back together, and from then on, he hand laid his own turnouts. That's the type of fellow he was. Now, back in 1974, I was hiking with a friend in the Caledon Hills. I was on a trail passing through the town of Cataract when I noticed a large path heading off to our right. We decided to follow it, and not too far along, we found a large circular depression, and it turned out to be the base of a turntable that had been removed in 1932. This got me interested as to why there would be a turntable there. Shortly after that, I found that a local book publisher put out a book by James Filby entitled The Credit Valley, the Third Giant. It seems that the Credit Valley was the third railroad out of Toronto, and it was the first one to be done in standard gauge. Well, after reading the book, I was hooked. I knew that was the line I wanted to model. I played around from time to time, and I moved from one home to the next. Didn't really have room for a layout, did a couple of dioramas, until I was 50 years old. Then, like I said, a couple of times I'd set things up in the 80s and that. But it wasn't until 2004, when I turned 50, that my wife at the time and my parents planned that I should get back into the hobby. This time, because we still lived in an apartment, I only had a small 11 by 6 space, one side of our living room. I decided to check out N scale, loved it. It worked, and I have this plan, and I started to build. Work on the first layout was slow. At the same time I was constructing it, I was trying to get a new business off the ground, computer repair shop and model railroad shop in one. It was at that time that I started to do a website work, and one of the businesses that I was buying my models from, RS Laser Kits. This is a sample of their work here. I fell in love with their kits, and I continued the building of that layout until 2008. At the time, decided to redecorate the apartment. The computer came out of the spare room. The layout was taken down and it was put in the spare room. I now had a 10 by 10 space. A new plan had to be drawn up. This is the new plan here around the block. Work was a little faster on this layout as I had used the modules from the original layout. And it was also at that time I switched from DC to DCC. This time I actually completed the track work and the wiring and was able to paint the fascia and put up the curtains underneath to hide all the junk. I was even actually going to run trains on this layout. Well, for a short time anyway. It was in early 2011, I had to make a hard choice to put my wife in a home. She'd been having health issues and she reached the spot where she could not be left alone and she needed full-time care. So to save money, I moved from the large apartment into a smaller one-bedroom unit. The train layout was carefully dismantled and it was stored for a while. Between 2011 and late 2016, I became a virtual modeler, working on plan after plan for my ideal layout. Research during the time was all I seemed to do, and I wanted a layout that ran from the northern terminus of the Credit Valley Railroad at Orangeville south to Cheltenham. And the brown line on the map here is the Credit Valley Railway. It was not until late in 2016 that I decided to move back into a larger apartment. So once again, a track plan for a new area had to be developed. Being single, I decided to take up my living room and dining room for the layout. Now I had an 18 by 8 foot space. The result was a 2-level layout with 4 stations on each level. The layout was done in a shadow box effect similar to my current layout. Photo 12 shows the one end of the layout. The turnouts were to be controlled with toggles and LEDs, indicators that were mounted on a control panel on the valence, as shown in this picture. As one would imagine, a helix had to be created. I didn't like the slinky type with ring on top of ring, as it was hard to see the locomotive as it was climbing. An article in one of the N-scale magazines showed how to make a helix into a mountain. But the bridge coming off the top just didn't look silly. It looked silly to me, I'm sorry. I had a friend, David McKenzie, helping me with the layout, and after discussing the helix, we decided to turn the mountain upside down and make a quarry helix. I'll talk about this in the film in a little while. In 2019, I found it was time to move again. So this time the layout was carefully taken down, and this one I constructed modules. The new space was about 16 by 9, so a new plan had to be drawn up and some of the modules had to be cut to a different size. Once again, the 2-level layout was redesigned and assembled. The issue this time was that before the end of the year, circumstances developed so that in December of 2019, I was moving yet again. This time the move was to a different city, over 1,200 kilometers northwest of my current location. This time the entire layout was taken apart and packaged for the big move. My new lady and I moved into our new home in December 2019. The basement for the house was one large unfinished room. It took about 3 months to build the new train room, and with it, once again, a new track plan. Once again, the same basic formula was used. This time, the room I was in, there was a small room, 8 by 12, and a larger room, 12 by 27. The layout would occupy the small room, come across the back wall of the larger room, and 13 feet down the larger room to the quarry helix. Both levels this time would be 30 inches deep to allow me lots of room for the mini laser cut kits I had collected in the 15 years of working with RS laser kits. This is the complete schematic of my layout. Now my DCC bus, because I do not like to solder, is made up of copper strapping. And I don't like to solder above my head. The copper strapping I mounted to a 1x3 wood. The track feeders have terminal rings crimped to them, and you just screw them to the bus. In my last layout, my DCC system was an Arduino Mega, called DCC++, shown here in the lower half of the shelf, hooked to a Raspberry Pi running JMRI. The throttles for the system can be any phone or tablet running engine driver on an Android or iThrottle on the Apple. I attempted to get working on my new system, but the layout and what I wanted to do with it was just too big for a little system. And finally, this is a shot of the almost complete helix. As you can see, I still need to ballast the track and add some more scenic details. At this point, I would like to show a short video that I made especially for this meeting, the complete layout tour of my entire current setup. Thank you. Hope you enjoyed it tonight. And if you have that video.
Yes, give me a second while I change over to
Okay.
all the ever so fun things.
After the video, we'll do a Q&A period.
Yes.
This is the 5th time I've tried to create this layout. And since we own this home, I think it'll stay for a while. There we go.
Oh, sorry.
Jim wants me to tell you about my layout. I moved to Thunder Bay in December of 2019. When we got here, our basement was nothing but one big open area. We had to create a train room and create a layout. And I've been at it now for about, 13 months. Come into my layout. Come in. As you can see, we've got a crew lounge to start with. Couch here, Trainmaster's TV on the big screen. Lots of model railroad supplies, paint and scenery over on this side. And we've got a layout. The one thing Jim mentioned when he saw some of the pictures of my layout was my helix. The helix, we decided I didn't like the slinky type because it's hard to watch the train in the layers. A fellow at one of the in-scale magazines had a wedding cake type layer, but then when you get to the top, you have to go across a bridge to get out of it. I didn't like the look of it, so we turned it upside down. This is our quarry helix. We've got 7 revolutions to get up. You can see at the bottom there, the little guy is fishing. There's water in the bottom and he thinks there's fish in there. And if you come around to this side and have a look, this is how we did it. The helix is made out of 1 sheet of 1/4 inch plywood. We did a spiral cut and then just let the layer go down. How I filled it in, this is all quilt batten. It's glued to the edge of the various layers. And inside, I used 3 different kinds of woodland scenics ballast, cinders, brown and gray to make the quarry. Now, up until a couple of weeks ago, I did have a DCC++ system here running on the Arduino, till I found out it did not have enough power to handle a layout this big with the number of locomotives we wanted to run if I had a full complement running operating sessions. So I'm switching over to Digitrax. The layout is 13 feet from the quarry to this back wall, 20 feet across, it's 12 feet along this wall, and I come back 4 feet. The layout actually starts here. This is around Matheson Farm, named for a dear friend who passed, Robin Matheson. He did all these buildings here. The 2 tracks at the back are my southern staging, which represent Toronto. And then we go through around the reverse loop, past Agater Farm. This is Cheltenham right here. That's the first station stop. We come along here. This will be the location for Garner Farm. That's my cameraman tonight, Scott Garner. Thank you, Scott. Into Boston Mills, which is the next town. There'll be a mill back here, and I'll use my Arduino to get the mill wheel going. We come around to Filby Farm. James Filby was the author of the Credit Valley Railroad book, and his family also had a farm in Boston Mills. Then we come around our corner. We run into the town that it's now called Inglewood, but back in 1900 when my layout is set, it was called Sligo Junction, and it was the junction to the Hamilton Northwestern. It's a fair-sized town, as you can see from the cutouts on the floor plan here. And as we come across, there'll be a bridge here. The Credit River is going this way again. Into the Forks of the Credit, which is in the corner. But these are the Forks Industries. There's going to be a tile and brick at the back, a furniture company here, and this is the footprint for the cooperage. Now this area here, this board will be taken out, and there'll be a trestle across this open space. And that brings us into the Forks of the Credit, because the river is going to come down the side and it comes out from the back. So it comes down and they both come out here at the big forks. The station's there. Up in the back is the open face crow's nest quarry, they called it. Through their yard. And this is where the river comes out to go down. This building here is the McLaughlin Bottling Works. That's where they got the spring water that they sent to Toronto to make Canada Dry Ginger Ale. Come across. It's the beginning of the spur that goes up to the quarry, and then it goes in to the helix. It goes around the helix and it comes out the back here and across. Now we're in the area called Churches Falls. As you can see, the town's going to be on the front. There's a team track and a passing siding. And there was a turntable at Churches Falls because it turned around the branch that headed out to 27 miles to Elora. The layout itself goes from Toronto up to Orangeville. And trains coming in from Elora would be turned around to go back to Elora. Here we have the sawmill. And around the corner there'll be another farm at the back here. I haven't named the farm yet. Everything's still under construction. We've only been 13 months building the layout. This is the town of Alton. It's got 2 tracks, a team track, and there's a lime kilns and a stockyard. And then we go across the river again here. There'll be a bridge on that. Coming across, it's just a little station under construction for Melville Cross. I haven't finished this kit yet. Melville Cross was with the Grand Trunk, and it's defunct right now. It was a narrow gauge line. The tracks are still there, but there's no narrow gauge running. Coming into our next area, this area is still a work in progress. The foam's going to be all trimmed down, so it's a gradual hill. But this is the Shepherd logging camp. And coming around the corner, back in the back here will be an apple orchard, Bachelor Estates. Another friend of mine who his family did have an apple orchard just south of the Orangeville station in the Orangeville Yard. This is the big Orangeville Yard. In end scale, it's about 9 feet, 10 feet long. Many tracks. I haven't got the turntable put in yet, but there'll be a single stall engine house and a couple of walls put up where they're starting to build their roundhouse. Coming across north of the yard, in this area there'll be a circus, Canadian Conklin Commonwealth Circus in 1900, and then in the middle of my reverse loop on the northern end is the main street in Orangeville. They called it Broadway because from storefront to storefront was 100 feet, and they did it that wide so that the farmers could back their wagons up to be loaded on either side and still have room for a wagon to go down the middle. And basically, that's my layout. As I say, last March 1st, I started it, so it's been about 13 months. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll now open it up if you have any questions. Thank you. Okay, that's the new layout.
That's amazing for 13 months.
And I think the only one that has seen my older layout that's here tonight is Clark. Are there any questions?
Yeah, well, go ahead.
Sorry there, Will. Maybe I missed at the beginning. What's the era of your railroad you're doing? I think I saw 440.
1900.
1900. Excellent.
The original Credit Valley Railroad was started in 1871, and by 1883, it was amalgamated into the Ontario, Quebec, and then into the Canadian Pacific. But at the time, there wasn't that many 1880s, 440s, 460s, 260s available in N scale. So I set the layout as a proto-freelance in 1900, as if the Credit Valley Railroad itself was still running the line.
Well, I'm interested in that area. There's one book. This was holding my computer up.
Oh, I've got that book. Yes, yes. That's a very good book.
Well, Larry knows. Hi, Will. How are you? It's Clark.
Hey there, Clark.
Good. Will, there's been several of us. I believe, Larry, you've met Jim. You knew Jim Filby as well, didn't you?
Yes, I have a Shay of his on my layout.
There you go. Yeah. He was an interesting character and, started his own books just because he couldn't help, or he could help modelers by doing that.
I have most of the series from James Filby and Ralph Beaumont, the Credit Valley series from Boston Mills.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, very, very good books.
Yeah.
Hey, Will, got a question from YouTube here.
Sure.
How did you make the transition between the layout and the backdrop?
Oh, okay. The backdrop was actually painted by my wife, Lori. And the three-dimensional part in front is actually just the same material we make our fascia out of, that hardboard, and randomly cut to look like a rolling hill, lay it flat on my workbench, and painted it brown, and then just glued on lichen, clump foliage, moss, rock castings, whatever worked to make it look like the hills I'd seen in Caledon.
Nice. And I got a personal question too. I was curious, from all the time that you moved your layout, what tips, tricks, and advice would you have that you know now that you would have wished you've learned the first time you moved your layout?
Well,
That's funny.
each time I moved, I sort of lost things along the way, damage. What I would have done in the first layout was made it all as modules, 100% modules, as like a Fremo type of module, and wired each individual section, joined it together with, well, what the Muskoka Club uses is the trailer lighting kits for automotives. You know, those 4-wire plugs. They wire it up with that. So I would have made it totally modular. I had never done that. I sort of did when I did the 18 by 8 foot, but then when I moved at a smaller location, I had to start cutting down modules because it wasn't a standard module. So that would be the only change. Plan it as a standard module so I could take one out, leave it underneath, you know. This time I'm in a permanent location, so everything's fastened right to the wall, and it's built old school on open grid and cookie cutter.
Will, I am absolutely fascinated with your helix. I think that's just a brilliant idea because it's the first time that I know of I've ever seen anybody try to do a helix like that, where you can actually see the complete train as it goes from the bottom section up to the top. That's just outstanding. What was the most difficult part of building that kind of a helix?
Okay, cutting the board itself was very easy. It's a 4x4 board, and we started with a known radius at the top. We got a 1-inch dowel and fastened it to the center of the board, and did the old trick where you put tape on a string and stretch out the pencil, and as you go around, the string goes around the center dowel. And we made sure that once around the dowel was a width that the track bed should be. That was the easy part. The hard part was underneath. There are 8 what I call stair steps positioned around the layout. Now, in the N-Scale magazine we looked, the gentleman there had all the calculations for his wedding cake version. So I had to take them and reverse it. And getting the fact that if the first brace is cut at 12 inches, you're going around, what does the next one have to be cut at to keep a 2% grade? And that's just a huge mathematical formula we had to work out. 1/8 of circumference. So we got to work a lot with the mathematical pi. I can't remember what the formula is now, but I do have a website, and on the website there's a tutorial.
It's a beautiful job. It really is.
Yeah. If you want the website, I can forward it to you later, and you can include it when you put it.
That would be great. Thank you.
Yeah. Anything else?
What kind of motor power do you run?
Motor?
What kind of motor power, what models do you run on your locomotive?
Oh, on the locomotives. The ones that are functional right now, I have model power. They've got a 1900 440 and 260. Bachmann has a 1900 460, and they've all been converted to DCC. What I have left to convert are the Atlas American and Atlas Mogul from 1880. And I also have 5 of the old Bachmann N-scale 440, the ones that you get in the train sets for Christmas. I've got 5 of those, and you can buy them for like $20 each at the various train shows down in Southern Ontario. So you know they're not going to run very well. I got 5 of them. They're going to be sitting on the spurs, unpowered, on my turntable, just for show. But basically, it's the Atlas model power and the one Bachmann. Bachmann and N-scale, if you get the Spectrum, they're very good runners.
Hey, Will, you moved, if I remember correctly, you moved to Thunder Bay, didn't you?
Thunder Bay, yes, sir.
Yeah. Do you know any of the guys up there?
Yes, I've got 2 of them help me out quite regularly and have been a really big help. So like they've said, I've done a lot in 13 months. Well, 3 of us have.
Yeah.
Scott Garner and Jeff Peterson.
Okay. There, yeah, the last time I was up there was for a TLR convention, and Frank Gary's up there. And there's a MMR up there who's got, if you get a chance to go visit his layout, it is stunning. It's an SN3.
Would that be Craig Symington
Yes.
with his HON 30?
I thought it was SN3. I could be.
Oh, it's HON.
Oh,
HON 30.
all right.
Amazing layout.
It is an amazing layout. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've seen Craig's.
Yeah. Good.
What's the hardest thing that you have to worry about in building an N-scale, Will?
The hardest thing?
Yeah.
Well, I'm on the point now where we're just finishing tweaking track. HO scale, I've worked in that. If you have a little bit of a misalignment in HO, you can get over it. N scale has to be bulletproof. The last 6 weeks, all we've been doing is what I call tweaking track. Maybe the joint wasn't 100% straight. It kinked a little bit. You got to take it up, move it, fix it. It's very easy to have a joiner and have the track go over top of the joiner. So we have to, move the joiner back, put it back in. Laying the track is hard. Putting decoders into DC locomotives the size of an Atlas 260 or an Atlas 440. The decoders are very tiny, and you have about six or 8, depending on what you want, leads to solder. They cannot be done with your hobby soldering iron. You have to get like a jeweler's or a circuit board soldering iron, which I don't have. So I've got 7 locomotives needing decoders. I'm trying to find somebody up here that can solder circuit boards, because that's what you need. And as far as doing the structures, the N-scale structures, almost all the ones I've got are wooden structures. And the one thing I need to get on first is my visor.
Yeah.
I've got a couple of visors. One is a lot more powerful than the other one. But it's just a case of you just take more time.
What about turnouts? What about the N-scale turnouts?
Right now, I'm using Atlas Custom Line. They're not bad, fairly good. A lot of people will recommend the Pico ones. The problem with the Pico ones is they've got a spring. They're spring loaded. That's a good thing because it makes sure you've got a firm connection. It's a bad thing if you're trying to use a switch machine. This is a lot of tension on the wire of the switch machine to throw the, counteract the spring.
Yeah.
In the future, when I have a little bit of money saved, I have a plan to pick up the Fast Tracks jigs and make my own turnouts. The problem with the Atlas ones is they have a plastic frog. So sometimes the trains can't make the connection on either side of the frog, and they tend to stutter and slow down. Where the Fast Tracks are a metal frog. But that's a big outlay because I've got 52 turnouts to replace.
With the decoders that you're using, do they have keep alives in them?
No,
No, okay.
the ones that will fit in the smaller units are only a 4-function.
I see. Okay, not familiar with them. I use, I'm in a larger scale, so
Yeah,
that would certainly help if you could get a keep alive in. But
yeah. The size is just too small.
yeah. Well, thank you.
Any other questions for Will?
Hey, Will, you
That's it.
did miss a photo with the layouts. I guess you're using the LED strips. You want to talk about them?
Which one?
LED strips.
The LEDs.
Oh, the LED strips, yes. I mount the LED strips just inside the valence or inside the upper fascia. Yeah, that's them there. That's taken from inside my layout. It's just a 16-meter strip, or 16 feet rather, 5 meter. But what I've found, they don't give you any instructions with them. There's 2 wires on each end. So the first time I put them up, self-adhesive backing sticks to the inside of the valence or inside of the fascia. And I put a wire on each end to make the circuit. After about 3 months, I noticed that at the ends, both ends, instead of my nice bright daylight color, I was getting yellow and amber. And every time the amber would be coming from the end more and more. And so what happened was I did a little research and found that you have to treat this type of LED strip as you would track and drop a feeder every 4 feet. Now, as you can see in the picture there, you'll see at one point, it looks like there's a copper flashing on the LED. Right there, yes. Those are every 3 LEDs. The LEDs can be cut into groups of 3 to use separately, or every 4 feet you drop a feeder to that strip, to the copper. And that disperses the power across the LED so it doesn't burn out any individual LED. Now, I've had friends that have taken this type of LED strip and they cut it down and they turn it into their lighting for their passenger cars. And with the proper resistor on it, you can dim them down so that it's not overpowering.
Will, what are you using for a power supply for your LEDs?
The power supply is just one of the regular miniature computer style,
Okay.
the silver box.
Yeah. Yep.
And I think it's a 5-volt, 6 amp.
Yep. That's what you can see up above my head is the LED strips. I really like them. Makes
Yeah.
really nice light. Yeah. It
Yeah.
lights your layout up very nicely.
A lot of light.
Yeah.
Now, the ones I got are very bright.
Mhm.
And with the shadow box effect, if I put them on the bottom of the layout, having them shine straight down, it was too bright for the operators.
Sure.
So I mounted it on the back of the valence on the top and the back of the fascia on the upper level, pointed towards the backdrop.
It's very effective.
It is good. And the other thing was my bus wire.
Yeah.
If we can go back to full screen, Ed.
Sure, hold on one second.
I've got a little sample here that I just put together.
That was genius. That's really made me smile when I saw that the first time.
I don't like to solder, for one. I'm not good at it. And the fellow that was helping me, his son was soldering up underneath the layout. And a drop of solder fell and caught him just below his glasses. Burnt and almost burnt his eye.
Yeah.
So we decided that this is a better system. Just the ordinary copper plumber's strap. I had an electrician and he said it's about an 8 gauge on there. And then the feeders come down, you put a little crimp connector on the end and screw it on.
Yep.
Very simple. You want to change, unscrew it, screw it back in.
Yep. Great idea.
Thank you. But that one actually came from David McKenzie down in Huntsville, another model railroader.
And that's how it evolves from down there to up here.
So any other questions?
Well, I did see during the video is that you had flat cars with that looked like they had three large barrels on them. What were those?
Well, they came from one of the train sets from Bachman. They're just a flat car with 3 molded barrels right on it. Somebody said they could be used for pickles. Somebody said it was used for water. Anything liquid instead of a covered hopper or a tank car.
All right, thank you.
First generation tank car. Open tubs.
Well, Will, I want to thank you so very much for taking the time to be with us this evening and to share your model railroad with us. I think you've done a fantastic job for 13 months, and I hope you'll come back in another 13 months and show us the shape it's in then, because based on what you've done so far, I know it's going to really be a spectacular model railroad when it gets finished.
Well, I'm going to try. We're trying. Like I said, I've got 2 helpers. They're both younger fellows, so they have to work. Like Jeff said, he had to wait for his holiday to come around to come over and spend a couple of days. I said to him, every day is a holiday when you're retired.
Well, I want to thank you again. I really do appreciate it.
Hey, Will, do you have a website? There's a question from YouTube.
Okay, I have a YouTube site, and it's just under my name, Will Annand, Annand. And I do have a hobby website where I've got photos and descriptions, the history of the Credit Valley Railroad. And that is in conjunction with RS Laser Kits, the company I was working with. So it's rslaserkits.com and then slash in capital letters CVR for Credit Valley Railway. And I can send both of those to Jim so you can put it in the description below.
That would be great. Let me ask you this, Will, can you get me a contact at RS Laser Kits, somebody that I can call and talk to?
Yes, it's owned by Rich Shepard and his wife is Trish.
Okay, do me a favor. Do me a favor.
His
Jim-
phone number is off his website,
Okay.
rslaserkits.com.
Gotcha.
So phone, he's in Missouri. So phone anytime, Monday to Saturday during business hours. And Trish usually will answer the phone and she's sort of the office person.
Got it.
Rich is the architect that decided to stop making big ones and start making little ones.
I understand.
But he does make good kids.
I understand. Will, thank you so much. I do appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Jim.
Yes, sir. Well, next time we